Everyone knows the postcard version of New York, the golden skyline, the yellow cabs, the city where anyone can supposedly make it if they try hard enough. But underneath that dream sits another New York, one built on slums, riots, mafia control, financial collapse, and a level of inequality that still defines the city today. Today we're going to show you that other side of the city that never sleeps. Before we continue, if you enjoy this kind of content, give the video a like and subscribe with the bell turned on so you never miss any of the journeys we have planned for you. 1. A slum so notorious it became a symbol of urban misery for the entire country. In the 19th century, a Manhattan neighborhood known as 5 Points was widely considered one of the worst slums in the Western world, a cramped, overcrowded district plagued by disease, poverty, and street gangs battling for control of its alleys. Charles Dickens visited the neighborhood during an 1842 trip to America and described it with genuine horror in his own travel writing, and the area's reputation for violence and desperation later inspired the film Gangs of New York, depicting the brutal gang warfare that once defined the district before it was eventually demolished. 2. Tenement housing so cramped and unsanitary, it triggered some of the worst disease outbreaks in American history. As waves of immigrants arrived in New York throughout the 19th century, landlords packed them into tenement buildings, cramped apartments often lacking proper ventilation, plumbing, or natural light, subdividing rooms again and again to squeeze in as many paying tenants as possible. These conditions contributed directly to devastating cholera and typhoid outbreaks that swept through immigrant neighborhoods repeatedly, and it took decades of public pressure and investigative journalism before the city passed meaningful housing reform laws requiring basic standards like windows and fire escapes. 3. A factory fire that killed 146 workers because the exit doors had been locked to prevent theft. In 1911, a fire broke out at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in Manhattan, and 146 workers, most of them young immigrant women, died, many after jumping from windows to escape the flames because the factory's owners had locked the stairwell doors to prevent employees from taking unauthorized breaks or stealing materials. The tragedy became one of the deadliest industrial disasters in American history and directly led to sweeping new workplace safety laws, but the deaths themselves stand as one of the starkest examples of how far profit-driven neglect could go in the city's early industrial era. 4. The deadliest riot in American history, sparked by a wartime draft and racial violence. In July 1863, in the middle of the Civil War, working-class New Yorkers, many of them Irish immigrants angry over a new military draft law that allowed wealthier citizens to pay their way out of service, erupted into days of violent rioting. The unrest quickly turned into brutal, racially motivated attacks against the city's black residents, including the burning of a colored orphan asylum, and the death toll from the riots, estimated in the hundreds, remains the deadliest civil disturbance in United States history. 5. A political machine that controlled the city for decades through bribery and vote fraud. For much of the 19th and early 20th centuries, New York City's government was effectively run by Tammany Hall, a political organization that maintained power through systematic patronage, bribery, and voter fraud, most infamously under the leadership of William Tweed, whose associates are believed to have stolen tens of millions of dollars from city coffers before his eventual downfall in the 1870s. Tammany Hall's influence over city politics persisted in various forms well into the 20th century, shaping how corruption and machine politics operated in major American cities for generations. 6. A construction boom that literally bulldozed entire working-class neighborhoods to build highways. Robert Moses, one of the most powerful unelected officials in New York City history, oversaw the construction of highways, bridges, and public housing projects across the city for decades, often at devastating cost to existing communities. His construction of the Cross-Bronx Expressway in the 1950s and 1960s tore directly through stable, densely populated neighborhoods in the South Bronx, displacing thousands of residents and accelerating a decline in the borough that would take decades to reverse. 7. A borough that became a symbol of urban collapse, with entire blocks abandoned or deliberately set on fire. Throughout the 1970s, large sections of the South Bronx experienced a wave of abandonment and arson, so severe that some landlords reportedly burned down their own buildings to collect insurance payouts rather than continue maintaining unprofitable properties. Aerial footage of the burning South Bronx became a nationally broadcast symbol of urban decay, and the phrase "the Bronx is burning" entered the American vocabulary as shorthand for a city seemingly falling apart. 8. A financial crisis so severe the city nearly went bankrupt, and the federal government initially refused to help. By the mid-1970s, New York City was on the verge of financial collapse, unable to pay its own debts, and when city officials asked the federal government for assistance, President Gerald Ford initially indicated he would refuse a bailout, prompting the New York Daily News to run its now famous headline, "Ford to City, Drop Dead," even though Ford never actually used those exact words. The city eventually received federal loan guarantees under strict financial oversight, but the crisis led to severe cuts in public services, including layoffs of police officers, firefighters, and sanitation workers at precisely the moment crime and urban decay were accelerating. 9. A citywide blackout that triggered widespread looting and arson within hours. In July 1977, a lightning strike caused a massive power failure that plunged the entire city into darkness for roughly 25 hours. Unlike a similar blackout a decade earlier that had passed with minimal disorder, this one, occurring amid the city's deep economic distress, triggered widespread looting and arson across dozens of neighborhoods, with over 1,000 fires reported and more than 3,000 people arrested, a stark illustration of how close to the surface the city's underlying tensions had become. 10. A crack cocaine epidemic that pushed the murder rate to levels the city has never seen since. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, New York City experienced a devastating wave of crack cocaine use and related violence, with the murder count peaking at 2,245 killings in 1990 alone, a level of lethal violence roughly 6 times higher than the city's murder rate in recent years. Entire neighborhoods, particularly in parts of Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Harlem, were profoundly reshaped by the epidemic, with effects on community trust, policing, and public health that extended for decades afterward. 11. A wrongful conviction case that became a lasting symbol of racial injustice in the city's criminal justice system. In 1989, 5 Black and Latino teenagers, who became known as the Central Park Five, were wrongfully convicted of assaulting a jogger in Central Park based largely on coerced confessions, later proven false. All 5 had their convictions vacated in 2002 after another man confessed and DNA evidence confirmed his guilt. But the boys had already served years in prison, and the case remains one of the most cited examples of how the city's justice system failed young men of color during that era. 12. A subway system so associated with danger during one period that a vigilante shooting became a national news story. During the crime wave of the 1980s, New York's subway system developed such a fearsome reputation that when Bernhard Goetz, a passenger who had previously been mugged, shot 4 young men he believed were attempting to rob him on a subway car in 1984, the case ignited a fierce nationwide debate over vigilante justice, race, and the city's ability to keep its own transit system safe. A debate that reflected just how much public fear had built up around the subway during that period. 13. A homeless population so large the city runs one of the biggest shelter systems in the entire country. New York City's municipal shelter system houses tens of thousands of people on any given night, one of the largest homeless service systems of any city in the United States, a reflection of the severe and persistent affordability crisis affecting housing across the entire metropolitan area. In recent years, the city has also faced the added strain of resettling large numbers of migrants and asylum seekers, further stretching an already overburdened shelter system. 14. Some of the smallest, most expensive living spaces of any major city in the developed world. New York consistently ranks among the most expensive cities in the world for housing, with average apartment sizes among the smallest in the country and rents that consume an outsized share of many residents' income. Stories of so-called micro-apartments, sometimes barely larger than a parking space, renting for what would be a comfortable monthly mortgage payment in most other parts of the country, have become a recurring symbol of just how extreme the city's housing affordability crisis has become. 15. A level of income inequality wide enough to place some of the world's wealthiest people within walking distance of deep poverty. New York City is home to one of the largest concentrations of billionaires anywhere on Earth, with luxury towers along its skyline selling individual apartments for tens of millions of dollars, while at the very same time, hundreds of thousands of residents live below the poverty line just blocks or even a few floors away. This extreme proximity between enormous wealth and severe poverty, often within the very same neighborhood, is frequently cited by researchers as one of the starkest visual representations of inequality found in any major city in the developed world. 16. An estimated rat population so large, the city eventually appointed an official dedicated entirely to fighting them. New York City's rat population has long been the subject of both public complaint and academic study, with various estimates over the years placing the number anywhere from the hundreds of thousands to several million, depending on the methodology used. In 2023, the city appointed its first ever official director of rodent mitigation, a position immediately and widely nicknamed the Rat Czar by local media, reflecting just how significant an issue urban wildlife management has become in a city of this density. 17. A mafia presence so entrenched it controlled entire industries for decades, not just crime itself. Throughout much of the 20th century, organized crime families, most notably the so-called Five Families, exerted significant control over specific industries across the city, including the construction trade, the Fulton Fish Market, and, notoriously, the private garbage collection industry, which for decades was so thoroughly infiltrated by organized crime that businesses had little real choice in which company hauled away their trash. Aggressive federal prosecutions throughout the 1980s and 1990s significantly weakened this influence, but historians still point to mob control of the waste industry as one of the most striking examples of organized crime's grip on the city's basic infrastructure. 18. A history at the very center of the American slave trade, memorialized today by little more than a small plaque. Wall Street, now globally synonymous with modern finance, was also the site of one of colonial New York's active slave markets, where enslaved people were bought and sold for decades during the 17th and 18th centuries. New York was, in fact, one of the largest slaveholding cities in the American colonies for much of that period, a history that receives far less public attention today than the street's modern financial identity, though a modest historical marker now stands near the original site to acknowledge it. 19. An island where more than 1 million unclaimed and unidentified bodies have been buried in mass graves for over 150 years. Hart Island, a small island off the coast of the Bronx, has served as New York City's public burial ground since 1869, where unclaimed bodies, including unidentified individuals, stillborn infants, and people whose families couldn't afford private burial, are interred by city workers, often using incarcerated laborers in simple pine boxes stacked in mass trench graves. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, aerial footage of new mass graves being dug on Hart Island to handle a surge in unclaimed deaths became one of the starkest images of the pandemic's toll on the city. 20. A pandemic that made the city the epicenter of the crisis in the entire country for weeks. In the spring of 2020, New York City became the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States, with hospitals overwhelmed, refrigerated trucks parked outside medical centers to serve as temporary morgues, and the constant sound of ambulance sirens becoming a defining feature of daily life across the city for weeks on end. The city ultimately recorded tens of thousands of deaths during the pandemic, a toll that reshaped public health policy and civic life in the city for years afterward. 21. A storm that flooded subway tunnels and killed dozens of residents almost a decade after the city thought it had prepared for the worst. In October 2012, Hurricane Sandy brought a massive storm surge into New York Harbor, flooding subway tunnels, cutting power to large parts of Lower Manhattan, and killing more than 40 people within the city itself. The storm exposed how vulnerable the city's aging infrastructure remained to severe weather, prompting billions of dollars in subsequent flood defense investment that experts still debate is sufficient given the increasing intensity of coastal storms. 22. A policing strategy that stopped and searched hundreds of thousands of mostly young, Black and Latino men every year at its peak. Throughout the 2000s and early 2010s, the New York Police Department's Stop and Frisk program resulted in hundreds of thousands of street stops annually, the overwhelming majority targeting young Black and Latino men, the vast majority of whom were found to have done nothing wrong. A 2013 federal court ruling found the program had been implemented in a manner that violated constitutional rights, leading to significant reforms, though the legacy of the policy remains a deeply contested and frequently cited example of racial disparity in urban policing. 23. A paradox where millions of people live surrounded by more human beings than almost anywhere else on Earth, yet report some of the highest rates of loneliness in the country. Despite its extraordinary population density, surveys and public health researchers have repeatedly found that a significant share of New Yorkers report feeling persistently lonely or socially isolated, a phenomenon researchers attribute to the transient nature of the city's population, the high cost and small size of housing that limits social gathering, and the sheer exhausting pace of daily life that leaves many residents with little energy left for building lasting connections, even while surrounded by more people than almost any other city in the world. 24. An attack that killed nearly 3,000 people and permanently altered the skyline and psyche of the entire city. On September 11, 2001, terrorist attacks destroyed the World Trade Center's Twin Towers, killing 2,753 people at the site alone, the deadliest single attack on American soil in the country's history. Beyond the immediate loss of life, the attacks triggered long-term health consequences for thousands of first responders and residents exposed to toxic dust in the aftermath, consequences that continue to claim lives and generate ongoing compensation claims more than 2 decades later. 25. A gentrification wave that has displaced longtime residents from neighborhoods their families lived in for generations. Across numerous historically working-class and immigrant neighborhoods, from Harlem to Williamsburg to the South Bronx, rapidly rising rents and property values over the past 2 decades have displaced many longtime residents, often communities of color, who could no longer afford to remain in neighborhoods their families had called home for generations. This ongoing transformation remains one of the most visible and contentious issues shaping the modern city, generating fierce debate over development, affordability, and who truly gets to call New York home. 26. Aging infrastructure so strained that basic subway reliability became a full-blown public crisis just a few years ago. Despite carrying millions of daily riders on one of the largest transit systems in the world, New York's subway experienced a severe reliability crisis in the mid-2010s, with on-time performance dropping so significantly that the state governor declared a formal state of emergency for the transit system in 2017. Decades of deferred maintenance and chronic underinvestment left the system's signals and infrastructure, much of it originally built more than a century ago, struggling to keep pace with modern ridership demands. 27, a city whose gilded surface has always concealed exactly this kind of hardship, generation after generation, from 19th century tenement slums to 21st century housing shortages, from Tammany Hall corruption to mafia-controlled industries, from the burning Bronx to a global pandemic epicenter. New York's history reveals a consistent pattern: extraordinary wealth, ambition, and glamour existing constantly alongside extraordinary hardship, often within the very same city blocks. It's a duality the city has never fully resolved, and arguably never will, given the sheer scale and density that define it. And so we reach the end of this journey through the other side of New York, the version rarely captured in postcards or movie skylines. A city built on slums and immigrant labor, nearly bankrupted, burned, and buried its own dead by the thousands in unmarked mass graves, and yet somehow always finds a way to rebuild its shine on top of it all. Both versions, the dream and the hardship, have always existed here at exactly the same time, layered on top of one another, like the city's own subway tunnels beneath its gleaming streets. If you made it this far, you now know the real story behind this city far better than the vast majority of people who only see it through movies and photographs. If you enjoyed this video, leave us a like, subscribe with the bell turned on, and tell us in the comments what surprised you the most about everything you just discovered. See you on the next journey.